Hello everybody, it is Tuesday, which means exactly what you're thinking. You have to see this face again. It's Tuesdays on Men of the Den with JD. That'd be me. So this is my first week where I get to kind of exclusively pick the topic, and a lot of times men on the channel will pick areas of expertise that they have personally experienced in their lives, whether it be through academics, social exposure, the workforce, or just random shit that they come up with in their head that they really want to talk about. So we are back once again in my own den, also known as my bedroom, and I am filming this on my bed. Last week, if you remember, I probably looked like shit. Last week was overcoming a sinus infection, ear infection, upper respiratory infection, and I have good news and I have bad news about being sick. The good news is my sinus infection and my ear infections have cleared up. Thank you, modern medicine and antibiotics, which we'll get to in a moment. But the bad news is that I have formed a lower respiratory infection, kind of also known as bronchitis, and I also have mono, which has left me exhausted, tired, wiped out. Pretty much any definition of tired that you can think of, that is pretty much me the last few weeks. We couldn't for a while figure out exactly what was causing my exhaustion. There was days at work where I had, and let me premise this with, I don't drink caffeine in excess amounts to get awake. Like, it takes me maybe a cup of coffee in the morning to get going, but other than that is like wildly unnecessary for me. And one day last week at work, I had like 4 cups of coffee, a Mountain Dew, and a Red Bull, all in an attempt to try and get me out of the state of just falling asleep where I was sitting. And that's what was happening to me. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm tired, I just want to go home. I was actually falling asleep at my desk, to a point where I was concerned about driving home because I was so exhausted. And the day before I had like 14 hours of sleep, but I still managed to get exhausted in the middle of the day. So it's a good thing that I am making this video in my bed and I get to edit it in my bed and not really leave my damn bed. So bear with me as I am dealing with I'm so freaking sexy. Bear with me as I go through this video this week that I have chosen on public health. So as I described in like my way early video, and it might have even been my audition video for the Den, I have a bachelor's degree in public health. I have a master's degree in public health and public health administration. And I also have a master's degree of science in criminal justice, which is a little bit different than public health, but it has to do with laws and why laws exist and why specific things are constitutional. And while this may be different for different parts of the world depending on where you're viewing from, having a degree in public health and having worked in public health, I have learned a lot to dispel rumors surrounding vaccinations. This is probably not going to be your idea of like a super exciting video, but I think it's really important to discuss public health in the queer community and why it's so vital to have a resource that you feel comfortable with talking to or turning to for advice when it comes to health, especially if you're in the queer community, because we oftentimes feel ostracized by members of not only the public, but by medical centers, by legal members, by people that work in clinics, businesses, wherever you name it. Depending on where you live throughout the world or country, we are often ostracized simply for who we are. We have a guest again. She's always back. She's been my nurse while I'm getting better. Right, kiddo? She's like, I don't care, Dad. Yes, you do. Don't ask how I got mono, because she's the only one giving me kisses at all. Unless she's cheating on me. She better not. Are you guilty? She looks right at the camera. So it's helpful to have a resource that you can turn to help you through different decisions and kind of wade through misinformation that exists out in the world. So that being said, I thought that I would discuss this week the importance of the flu vaccination and kind of start a mini-series throughout my random weeks on the Den where I'm going to discuss different public health issues specifically related to the LGBT community. I think that it's really important for us to talk about. So this week I'm going to talk about vaccinations, but in the future I plan on talking about gender-neutral sex education, where to find the best resources for healthcare if you are in the LGBT community, especially the trans community, because that can be a huge anxiety build for a lot of people, especially friends of mine that are trans that have gone through the medical system only to be humiliated, ostracized, which is pathetic and stupid, and I hate any medical practitioner who says that they uphold their duty to do no harm, and then they do. If you are a medical practitioner in the world and you deny somebody their basic right to healthcare because they are trans, you are garbage. So that being said, vaccinations. One of the biggest myths that comes from the world of vaccinations is that vaccinations cause autism. No, they don't. Come at me, world, with your BS. One study that said there might be correlation. If you've ever taken statistics, both business, health, whatever it may be, you and I have. Not only have I taken it, I teach biostatistics. Correlation does not equal causation. What that means is just because something happens at the same time something else happens doesn't mean that they're related at all. So if a plane goes down, that's a morbid example. Let's try something more happy. God, this is tough. I'm a morbid person when it comes to public health. And not just because I'm morbidly obese. If a group of school children gets really, really sick, at the same time a kid who just got through chemo comes back to school, there are going to be parents and there are going to be teachers and there are going to be people who think that all the kids in school got sick because this individual with chemo came back to school. I guarantee that one child did not come in contact with everybody in the school. That does not mean that they may not have brought something, but just because that child came back and all the kids got sick, it does not mean that this is what caused this. So when we look at this and we look back at autism rates, especially when it comes to diagnosis, people say that in the last 20, 30, 40 years, autism has skyrocketed in diagnosis numbers, and so has the number of vaccinations that people have had. So while vaccinations have increased, primarily because science is freaking awesome and has created things that have eradicated things like, oh, I don't know, smallpox and polio. Vaccinations to prevent disease have increased, and so have the number of people who have been diagnosed with autism. So it would lead many, mostly unsuspecting parents, that an increase in vaccinations has led to an increase in autism, when in reality what is happening is that correlation and causation effect that we discussed a few seconds ago. Something that most people don't consider in this vaccination argument is that 20, 30, 40 years ago, diagnosing autism wasn't as prevalent because the tools weren't there to do so. So not a lot of people were diagnosed with it. People didn't suddenly start getting cancer when you could diagnose cancer. Cancer started to be diagnosed when people realized what was making them sick. So naturally, when you have the ability to diagnose something, more people are going to be diagnosed with said illness. So just because these two events happened kind of around the same time, in fact there was the flu vaccination became very prevalent much later, but vaccinations in general have been around for quite some time. So people thought that with this increase in inoculations and vaccinations came this huge boost of people with autism, and that's why people have autism. As I said before, correlation does not equal causation. So get that stereotype out of your head, because there is like 99.9% of research studies that support that vaccinations do not cause autism. And there's like one, maybe two research studies that somewhat show a level of causation, but they haven't been supported, they're not peer-reviewed, and they aren't easily duplicated, which anybody in the science community knows that in order for your research study to be considered valid, it needs to be able to be replicated on a huge basis to prove that what you found in your research study is actually valid. So all of that leads me into why it is so important to get your flu vaccination. I am somebody who gets it every single year. It's not just because I am somebody who has studied and understands public health. It's because I understand something called herd immunity. Herd immunity is basically where if enough people in a given community are vaccinated against something, the likelihood that they are going to be able to successfully carry that disease and transmit it to somebody who has not been vaccinated is much, much lower. So if out of 100 people in X township, 80% of them, so 80 people, are vaccinated against influenza. And there are 20 people who aren't, whether it be because they chose not to, because they're elderly, or they are infants, or they are sick and they can't withstand the vaccination. The fact that 80% of the town is vaccinated against this illness, it actually increases the likelihood that they're not going to contract this illness because enough people around them aren't able to be carriers. They cannot contract the virus or the bacteria, whatever it may be. They can't contract that infection because enough people around them have it. So when you choose as a healthy person who can withstand a vaccination not to get the flu vaccination, you are ultimately putting not only yourself at risk of getting really sick, you're putting people who are elderly, who are way too young to be able to get these vaccinations, or people who are going through chemotherapy, people who are going through different forms of treatment that can't get the vaccination. Those are the people that we need to be protecting through herd immunity. And that's why that theory in public health exists, and it's been proven. It's really easy to say, I've never gotten the flu, I don't need to get I'm always healthy. Well, for younger generations now, you probably have never had something called chicken pox because there is a vaccination that is preventing you from being able to get it. But some vaccinations weren't available for me, so I went through the chicken pox when I was a kid, but you may not have because you got the vaccination. So if you're one of those people who thinks, I'm never gonna get it, I've never had all of these measles, mumps, and rubella, and polio, and all these things. Well, no, you haven't, because vaccinations exist, and they work really well. Are there allergic reactions to the flu shot? Yes. If you have an allergy to eggs, it's not recommended that you get the flu shot, primarily because it is harvested from utilizing egg product. For the most part, the flu vaccination is insanely safe for most people to get. You just have to talk to your doctor and decide what form of it is the best. Contrary to popular belief, you are not getting injected with an active flu virus to which you contract and you feel better. You're actually being given a deactivated form of the virus to which your body gets that deactivated form of the virus and it increases its resistance to that virus. So if you are exposed to that virus, you don't actually contract the illness because your body has the ability to fight it off, which ultimately allows you to not carry, which ultimately allows you to contribute to herd immunity, which benefits people who are elderly and babies and the sick all over the place. You aren't going to catch the flu from getting the flu shot. Again, correlation and causation. Some people have reported getting sick after getting the flu vaccination. I got the flu vaccination about a month ago, and I have an upper respiratory infection and mono. Neither of those things are because I got the flu vaccination. That doesn't even make any sense. That's like saying that you got the rubella vaccination and suddenly you sprained your ankle. Therefore, rubella causes sprained ankles. You see where I'm getting at with this? So that being said, that concludes my first of my probably many public health rants that I'm going to do on this channel. If you have any questions in regards to any of the stuff that I touched on today, please feel free to drop a comment down below, whether this is on YouTube or Facebook. I'll do my best to get back to all of the questions that I can, and if I don't have the answer to it, I will very happily direct you in a direction where you can contact somebody from your local health department. So I am gonna go back to sleeping, drinking lots of fluids, and binging on Will and Grace because it's back this week. I'm so excited. I'm so excited I could sleep. Does that tell you how sick I am? I'm so excited I could actually sleep. I'm delirious. Anyways, thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of the week's topics. Derek and Greg had an amazing video on Halicon yesterday. I am looking forward to the other topics coming later this week. I hope you're excited too. See you next week on Tuesday on Men of the Den. Bye!